Welcome. In this video, we want to introduce IPSAS. We want to start by discussing the need for IPSAS in public sector financial reporting. One of the most important things is to do with transparency and accountability. There is increasing need for public sector entities to be transparent to their constituencies around their finances, as well as being able to demonstrate good accountability, particularly in this time where most economies are facing significant turbulence and their challenges. The need for transparency and accountability cannot be overemphasized. Secondly, the need and the demand for timely information. Most legislations, guidelines that governs public sector financial reporting have got tight deadlines with regards to the provision of financial information. And IPSAS becomes very important to ensure that information is provided for in time to meet those stakeholder needs. Thirdly is the issue of dependence on capital markets. Increasingly over the past decade or two, we have seen that governments have been going to borrow from the private sector on the capital markets. And because they are borrowing on this market, the demands that are needed in the private sector are also required for the same government. So they need to provide information that can support the providers of resources with the required information to make decisions about providing capital. Then obviously, the need for robust financial management system is also very important as the complexity of government operations has increased over the years. So IPSAS comes in to help in that respect. Now, let's talk about the different types of IPSAS. There are major two bodies of IPSAS that are currently available. The first one is accrual-based IPSAS, and the second one is cash-basis IPSAS. So you'll see that as different entities and as different governments adopt IPSAS, depending on where they are, cash-basis IPSAS could easily be the starting point as they move to accrual-based IPSAS. However, it is important to note that the intention is to get every government entity, every local authority, and every public sector entity to accrual-based IPSAS. Let's talk about the benefits of IPSAS. Number one, I think IPSAS will enhance accountability in a big way with regards to how financial resources are being handled by different constituencies that are reporting. Secondly, is the issues around consistency. Consistency comes in two forms. From one year to the next, we want the different stakeholder groups want consistent information reported on, but also it becomes easy to look at consistency within different entities. For example, you'd want consistency from one local authority to the next with regards how they report. Another benefit of IPSAS is the issue around governance. IPSAS will enhance governance in a big way. Just an example that would come is the issues around the disclosures, say for example related party transactions, which would go a long way to improve the governance of those particular entities. Transparency, I've spoken about transparency in a big way. There is need for transparency, particularly where there's been a move to curb corruption and ethical behavior. IPSAS will enhance transparency in a big way. Issues of comparability linked to consistency. We want to be able to compare one local authority with the next, one ministry with the next, one government department with the next, and having a similar framework, or rather the same framework being used by all these entities will enhance the comparability of those financial statements. Last but not least is the quality of financial information that would support decision making. I believe that one of the challenges that we have for poor decision making that most public sector entities end up making is sometimes the unavailability of quality information. As government gets into debt, as it borrows, and a lot of decisions are made without quality financial information, those decisions will not be in the best interest of the constituency that they serve. Right, let's talk about the standard setting process. I think just there's a due process that is followed when it comes to standard setting, and it also involves a lot of stakeholder contributions. So the first thing the first process that is used is the consultation process, where different stakeholders are consulted on a matter. From there, an exposure draft is then issued. Again, the exposure draft is widely circulated, and anyone or any entity is free to give their input on the exposure draft. From the exposure draft, an IPSAS standard is then issued, which is then leads to high quality standards as a body when you look at IPSAS as a whole. Now, I want to talk about the transaction neutral approach. You'll see that this is very important as we begin to look at the standard setting process. So when standards are being set, the first thing that they have to consider is whether the issue that they want to deal with has been dealt with under IFRS. So IFRS becomes a first consideration. From there, the IPSAS, an IPSA foundation is made, whether there is a decision to say, should we depart from what IFRS does, or is this issue not dealt with under IFRS? So that lists the setting of a strong IPSAS foundation. Now, the transaction neutral approach becomes very important, where it says transactions within the public sector and private sector should be reported the same, particularly if they relate to the same thing. So a motor vehicle that is bought in the public sector, that is as a way of an example, should be accounted for the same as a motor vehicle that's bought in the private sector. That's what the transaction neutral approach is saying. Now, just to look at the IPSAS standards that are currently there. Currently, we've got 40 IPSAS standards, which are mandatory for every entity. And when they report, they have to say that they've complied with all the standards. These, like I said, they are binding and were first issued in 2000. Now, there's also non-mandatory guidance, which we've issued initially in July 2013, and there are 3 of them. These we call them recommended practice guidelines. They are non-binding, and entities are free to apply them as they enhance the value of their financial reporting. Now, just to look at the structure of the standard, this is the way in which the standard is structured. You start with objectives, then you look at the scope, then they look at the definitions of key terms that are covering the standard. Then there is the main text, the main body of the standard. After the main body, the standard will deal with the effective date in which that standard is to be applied. Then the appendices, which includes additional definitions and additional explanations. Then there is a comparison with the relevant IFRS, where they will explain areas of departure from that particular IFRS. Thank you very much for watching this video.